Bert Quint in Mexico City, Tony Sargent in the demilitarized zone in Vietnam, Daniel Shore in Prague, and Bruce Morton in Maui, Hawaii.
Good evening. Mexico City's 2-month-old student rebellion flared into violent street fighting overnight. At least 15 persons have been reported killed so far in the last 24 hours. The most serious violence broke out after police and troops moved on students who retreated to a campus in the northwest part of the city after pulling back from the University of Mexico campus last week. CBS News correspondent Bert Quint has the story.
It's been another long and bloody night in Mexico City, with Mexican students continuing their battle against the Mexican Army and police. This time, there were students of the National Polytechnic Institute. And it wasn't only rocks and bottles, but rather bullets fired by snipers from within and near the institute, aimed at the police who have been their enemies since officers broke up a minor demonstration with unnecessary force last July. The riot police, grenadiers they're called here, and the secret agents helping them, called for reinforcements from the Army, and the troops came in strength, following armored assault cars that crashed the school's gate. Through the halls and classrooms the soldiers went, knocking down any locked door that stood in their way. They were restrained, though, by their officers, who cautioned them not to do unnecessary damage. They found a laboratory where the young chemist had been busy manufacturing Molotov cocktails. They also found a few men in the building, but whether they were rioting students or simply caretakers and cafeteria employees, as they claimed, was not clear. Just when it looked as though this night's round of violence had ended, it started suddenly again. From the apartment buildings near the Institute, several shots burned toward the troops and the grenadiers who were preparing to leave. Secret agents, police, and soldiers all moved quickly, storming up the stairs of a house across the street. They knocked on some doors and knocked other ones down, looking for the snipers. They took several prisoners, but in the confusion it was hard to tell who was minding their own business in their own homes and who the snipers. All of these were sights strange to observers of this country that for so long has been an oasis of stability in the revolutionary desert of Latin America. And though the soldiers are in clear control here, the mood of the city remains a frightened one. With dawn approaching now, the troops are still in the streets and the snipers are still in the buildings. Bert Quint, CBS News, Mexico City.
Out here at Roundup, a day seems about a week long. Starts before the sun does. All day long, you're cutting cows and picking little old strays out of the mesquite. And just when you think the day's getting over, there's still a lot of work to do. But I'll tell you something. There's never been a working day yet when you couldn't take time for a good smoke.
Come to where the flavor is. Come to Marlboro country.
In Vietnam, American infantrymen, for the first time in the war, began a sweep of a communist stronghold in the Mekong Delta, 75 miles south of Saigon. Hundreds of Viet Cong were believed to be operating in that area, but initial contact was very light. A few days back, there was a U.S. Marine sweep inside the demilitarized zone, and it produced a rich haul of enemy weapons in what had previously been a North Vietnamese sanctuary. Tony Sargent reports.
The Marines attacked these hills and forced the enemy to retreat from places the North Vietnamese must have thought were completely safe. So safe that they stored in these hills tons of ammunition and supplies. The Marines have found some of the war's largest weapons caches in this sweep in and just below the DMZ. Hundreds of rockets, thousands of mortar rounds, and nearly 1 million shells for individual enemy rifles and carbines. In this area, the enemy re-equipped many of his forces as they made their way on the long march from North Vietnam toward targets in the south. The Marines will destroy these weapons and this ammunition before they leave. The North Vietnamese did not just camp here, they lived here. The bunkers and huts are fairly large and very waterproof. These mountain trails were built by the North Vietnamese months, even years ago. This operation is conducted by the 9th Marine Regiment, 3rd Marine Division. The regiment is commanded by Colonel Robert Barrow.
We've done two things in our operation, really. We've uncovered his caches of ammunition and rice supplies, for example, over 33 tons to date of rice. And we have, in the process, encountered his elements of his main forces, which we believe at this time were in the process of marrying up themselves with the gear preparatory to conduct operations.
Well, just how much has this set the enemy back, then?
I think the division we're operating against, the 320th NVA division, has perhaps been rendered ineffective for most of the monsoon, because all of this equipment and supplies that he's had down here had to be laboriously inserted over a long period of time, particularly during dry weather. And now that the monsoon has set in, and he will have much of the same difficulties we experience in moving during the monsoon.
No Allied force had ever before put soldiers into this rugged mountain terrain. No supply convoy could get within miles of here. Helicopters are the only means of resupply on these steep ridges. Because of the small helicopter landing zones, supplies must be moved away quickly. To bring the same amount of weapons and supplies again from North Vietnam after the Marines have left will take the enemy months. The monsoon season may make it temporarily impossible to begin. Tony Sargent, CBS News at the DMZ.
Almost a month ago, there was a riot with racial overtones at the largest U.S. servicemen's stockade in Vietnam. A white soldier was killed and 65 GIs were injured. UPI reported today that 12 prisoners, all Negroes, still control a section of the stockade at Long Binh. The spokesman was quoted as saying that the men are receiving food and water, but otherwise are just being ignored in the hope they will rejoin the other inmates.
For headache pain, muscular pain, or fever of a cold, is there any way to improve on Bayer aspirin to make it faster or stronger? Well, suppose you buffered it, or combined it with other drugs, or fizzed it, or tried to find a stronger ingredient and gave it a fancy name. Would any of these things make Bayer aspirin any faster or stronger? Well, first of all, aspirin is already the strongest pain reliever you can buy. Fizzing wouldn't improve it, nor would combining aspirin with other drugs. And buffering doesn't add speed or strength or gentleness either. You see, no one has ever found a way to improve on Bayer aspirin, because Bayer is 100% aspirin, and aspirin is the strongest pain reliever you can buy. Bayer works wonders.
Another scheduled Moscow summit meeting between Czechoslovak and Soviet leaders was called off today. No official reason was given, but informants said the Russians are demanding that the Czechoslovak delegation include more conservative communists who favor Moscow policies. Reports tonight are that the Kremlin talks may begin over the weekend. Some Czechoslovak officials still are expressing optimism about a partial withdrawal of Soviet bloc troops, but CBS News correspondent Daniel Shore tells us that feeling is not generally reflected in Prague.
Old Prague is a skeptical city. I guess if you've been through a couple of occupations, you have a right to be skeptical. But most Czechs I talk to, and these days Czechs don't want to appear in front of cameras, most Czechs I talk to are unimpressed by the announcement that a phased withdrawal of Soviet troops is starting. For one thing, they'll believe it when they see it. And what they see now is the Russian troops still here in force, still acting as though they own the place. For another thing, they want to know how many are staying. Enough, they suspect, of the original 500,000 still to represent a menacing occupation force. Also, how long they'll stay. Thirdly, they say, a partial withdrawal is no big favor. Winter is coming. There's no place to provide winter quarters for this huge army. And fourthly, the Czechs wonder what price their leaders paid for the promise that most of the invasion force would pull out. There's been severe Russian pressure on the Dubček regime for a purge of its personnel and a purge of its policies. Party chief Alexander Dubček has so far stood firm against any widespread turning back of the clock. Dubček and other Czechoslovak leaders have been barnstorming the country, emphasizing their unity, rallying popular support. But there are hints that Dubček's position is weakening. It was not Dubček, but Premier Aldrich Chernik who made the announcement of the Russian pullout. And Chernik warned the nation not to glorify Dubček, not to pin too much hope on one personality. More than a month after the invasion, the Russians have really not accomplished what the invasion was meant to do. The Dubček regime has reopened the border to Westerners, has reaffirmed its reform goals, has rejected any large-scale purges or ritual show trials or confession of counter-revolution that would have provided some meaning, some sense to the invasion. The question that Czechs are asking now is whether Dubček's policies, and perhaps Dubček himself, will survive the second Moscow summit. Daniel Shore, CBS News, Prague.
In Moscow today, a young American girl identified as Vicky Revere of New York and a British student tried to distribute some leaflets protesting the Czechoslovak invasion. They were arrested immediately by Russian secret police. The UN General Assembly opened its 23rd annual session today and admitted its 125th member, Swaziland. There's expected to be a lot of backstage discussion of Czechoslovakia and Vietnam, but the two crises are not among the items on the session's prospective agenda.
I'm Kurt Gowdy, and this is the exciting new Phillips 66 Family Pro Football TV Handbook. Look, AFL, NFL schedules, histories, rosters, all-time records. Plus official signals, diagrams of the winningest plays, playing tips, a family quiz, and coupons good for a discount on these footballs. It's free at any participating Phillips 66 station. Just ask for the Family Pro Football TV Handbook. I recommend it.
Now let's circle over to take a look at the expressway. There seems to be a moderate
This
flow on the
is the real test of gasoline mileage, and one of the best reasons of all for using Phillips 66 high-performance gasoline. Phillips 66 gasolines have an extra reserve of power that lets your engine run easy in stop-and-go traffic, and that in turn means better mileage. At Phillips 66, it's performance that counts.
Republican vice presidential candidate Spiro Agnew has defended his use of the terms Polak and Jap and says his critics misunderstood him. Pointing out that he himself is of Greek ancestry, Governor Agnew told a Hawaiian audience he meant no offense when he referred to his friend, Baltimore Sun correspondent Gene Oishi, as the Fat Jap. Bruce Morton reports.
His original Fat Jap remark made a few days ago on the press plane to a reporter he'd known for months was, he says, a joke. When it finally reached print, it disturbed him more than anything else during the campaign. Agnew chose a luncheon crowd on Maui Island who'd probably never heard of the original story to make an emotional ad-lib reply.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sick of sloganeering. I'm sick of people reading something different into law and order than what law and order really means. I'm sick of people attempting to put my thoughts into a context that they didn't exist in when I spoke them. I'm not going to apologize for the spirit in which I said what I said to Gene Oishi. I am going to apologize to any who might have read in my words an insult to their Japanese ancestry, or to any who might have read into my words an insult to their Polish ancestry. And I would say that 90% of the people of this country who are born of immigrant parents understand probably better than most how important it is that we, the United States of America, one of the few countries in the world where it's safe to laugh, don't lose our senses of humor. If I have inadvertently offended anyone, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. To those of you who have misread my words, I only say you've misread my heart.
The Democratic vice presidential candidate, Senator Edmund Muskie, today disclosed that he has met twice with Senator Eugene McCarthy since the party's convention. Presumably, Muskie sought McCarthy's support for the ticket. Muskie himself would not describe the substance of their discussions. At a news conference in Minneapolis today, Vice President Humphrey defended the Democratic flank on Vietnam, spoke out against the anti-Vietnam hecklers who have lined his campaign trail, and issued a challenge to Richard Nixon on the issue of the war.
Mr. Nixon said early this year that he had a plan to end the war. Well, if he has one, he owes it to his country to make that plan available. Because every American that I know of in high public position would like to see this war ended. No man has a greater stake in peace than the President of the United States, this President. And no man that I know of is more desirous of peace than this President, Mr. Johnson. And I'm going to support his endeavors. If he does not succeed, then when I become the President, as I have said, as any new President surely would, I will reassess the entire situation, militarily, politically, economically, diplomatically. And I will do whatever I can to try to bring this conflict to an end, but to do it in such a way as to achieve our objectives, namely the safety of South Vietnam and their right of self-determination.
Mr. Vice President, the hecklers have kept your campaign and your speeches disrupted and off-key. What can you do in the way of an effective approach toward them? Is there anything that can be done?
It is not easy to speak when there are organized groups of hecklers. These are not just hecklers. These are highly disciplined, well-organized agitators. Many of them anarchists. Many of them, I'm not sure what. The numbers are not large. Their qualities of audibility rather large. I want to make it clear from this platform, as I shall throughout this country, that I believe that some of these groups are determined to destroy the effectiveness of the Democratic Party and indeed to destroy this country. And I don't intend to let them do it.
Campaigning today in the farmlands of the Northern Plains, Republican Richard Nixon blamed the Democrats for reduced farm income. Nixon said that farm income never before has declined in wartime, and in his words, it must have been planned, for it seems impossible for these wartime reverses to have accidentally occurred. Democratic Senator Ernest Greening, who was defeated in last month's Alaska primary, today declared a write-in candidacy for re-election. State law forbids such a race by a primary loser, but the 81-year-old Greening said the constitutionality of this will be challenged in the courts. The Senate showed reluctance today to begin the politically hot floor fight and potential filibuster over the nomination of Abe Fortas as Chief Justice of the United States. But tonight, Senator Mike Mansfield tried to get the matter moving. And Roger Mudd reports.
Senator Mansfield, faced with a lengthening debate on a minor tax bill and on defense appropriations tonight, moved to call up the Fortas nomination. Mansfield's motion is debatable, and this would set off the long-expected filibuster tomorrow when the Senate reconvenes. Mansfield's surprise move came after a day of speculation and denial that the Senate leadership had made a deal to dispose of the nomination, a resolution declaring that no vacancy exists on the Supreme Court because of Chief Justice Warren's conditional retirement. Mansfield said talk of such a deal was cooked up by somebody smoking pot. Dirksen confirmed he had mentioned the idea in a meeting last night with the anti-Fortas leader, Robert Griffin of Michigan. But Dirksen today was untypically unexpansive with reporters.
If such a resolution were introduced, and if under the rules it could be called up, and if a majority of the Senate approved, then of course you would probably cut short the time that would be devoted to the nomination. Now, as to how I feel about it, well, I guess I will just reserve judgment until it comes up. It could be an entirely moot question, and it may not even arise.
But Senator Griffin quickly welcomed the proposal.
I detect that there's a good deal of support, that quite a few senators who earlier got committed for the nomination of Mr. Fortas are seriously concerned and disturbed by some of the revelations that have come to light, and frankly would like to get off the hook. This would be a convenient way, I think, to dispose of the matter without a vote directly on the merits. As I say, a lot of senators would like to see it disposed of on a procedural question, and there is no vacancy on the Supreme Court to be filled, and that will be very obvious to the whole country on October the 7th when Chief Justice Warren bangs the gavel and opens the court.
An Air Force KC-135 Stratotanker crashed while attempting an emergency landing today at Wake Island in the Pacific. 11 of the 56 persons aboard were reported killed, 23 injured. The plane was trying to land after developing engine trouble en route from Guam to the United States. The Air Force has grounded all F-111A fighter bombers again following yesterday's crash of one of the swing-wing jets in Nevada. It was the 9th loss in less than 2 years of an F-111A, each worth more than $6 million. The National Federation of Priests Councils, representing about half the nation's Roman Catholic priests, today urged an impartial hearing of the birth control dispute that has split the Washington, D.C. area's archdiocese. But a spokesman for Patrick Cardinal Oboyo replied that the dispute, in which he has so far disciplined 13 priests, is not open to mediation. Prices advanced for the 7th straight session on the New York Stock Exchange today, pushing the Dow Jones Industrial Average to its highest level in a year. Volume was 15,200,000 shares. The exchange index gained 19 cents. The nation's third largest bank, Chase Manhattan, is cutting its prime interest rate. That's the one granted to its best business customers from 6.5% to 6%. It's the first such reduction by a major U.S. bank since January 1967. Observers say the move reflects a general easing of credit and may lead to eventual lowering of consumer interest rates.
From the room downstairs at Marty's
to the places gourmets dine,
to the all-night spots along Route 99. You'll find Wesson in the kitchens of more restaurants by far, used by connoisseurs of cooking ultra-fine.
More restaurants use Wesson than any other brand of oil, and it's their business to know.
Certain clothes are perfect for keeping cats above a kid. But now, here's a new catsup, perfect for keeping cats above a kid. New, thicker Hunts, made with more tomatoes than before, in a special, easy-pour bottle. So it pours when you want it, and stays where you pour it. It's just too thick to be messy. Neat. From Hunts.
From North Korea today came another warning that the 82 crewmen of the U.S. intelligence ship Pueblo will be freed only when Washington apologizes for alleged spying. The United States, of course, has held to the position that the Pueblo was not inside North Korean waters at the time of capture, and it has rejected communist claims that the Pueblo fired the first shots. CBS News has obtained, through the North Korean mission in East Berlin, some official propaganda films giving the communist version of the Pueblo affair. It includes first pictures of the Pueblo tied up in North Korea's Wonsan Harbor.
This is the armed spaceship Pueblo of the U.S. imperialist Russian forces, captured by the naval force of the Korean People's Army. They are the espionage agents on board the armed spaceship Pueblo of the U.S. imperialist Russian forces, who were captured in their hostile acts after their deep intrusion into the territorial waters of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
I instructed him also to
Operations officer was ordered to prepare all his recognition codes and to see that all the crew were trained in the use of weapons. In this way, the espionage activities against the Democratic People's Republic of Korea had long since been planned and prepared specifically and in great detail. The captain confessed the espionage activities in the areas of Maryangdo and Wonsan this way.
I plan to spend about 2 days in the vicinity of each Maryangdo and Wonsan and to concentrate my efforts on whichever area had the greatest amount of naval activity. I organized watch sections under the officer of the deck to record everything encountered. If it was possible to get close enough to any activity, it was to be photographed. Secondly, all radars that were intercepted were to be reported to the officer of the deck, and he was ordered to report them to me and record them. We planned to fix the position of any new radar that we intercepted.
I believe at the time of our capture, our position had been at 39 degrees 17.4 minutes north, 127 degrees 46.9 minutes east, about 7.6 miles from Yodo.
We further proceeded deep into coastal waters off Wonsan. It was at this moment that the naval patrol boats of the Korean People's Army appeared suddenly and signaled for our nationality. To hide our identity, we signaled hydrographer and hurriedly made ourselves away from there while firing immediately at the naval patrol boats of the Korean People's Army. However, our ship had gone so close to the coast of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea that it was no use for us to try to escape, and we were arrested at last by the naval patrol craft of the Korean People's Army.
Look at Johnson, the ringleader of the U.S. imperialist races, the most vicious enemy of the people of the whole world, and the sworn enemy of the Korean people. Johnson went wild when he woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning at the staggering news that the armed spyship Pueblo was captured. U.S. imperialists, don't miscalculate. If you keep trying to solve the case by threat and blackmail resorting to force of arms, you will get nothing but corpses and death. Bear this in mind.
In a later segment, we will show you North Korean films of the Pueblo crewmen talking about their lives in captivity. And that's the way it is, Tuesday, September 24th, 1968. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
Pretty skimpy lunch.
Enough for this weather.
Soda pop all you're having.
Too hot to eat. What's the mother to do?
Serve Total for breakfast. The only leading cereal, hot or cold, with a whole day's vitamin supply. 1 bowl, 1 ounce, gives you 100% of every minimum daily adult vitamin requirement now set by the U.S. government.
You get your vitamins come what may when a bowl of Total starts your day.
What are bows? Oh, a buttery tasting, popcorny, salty, crunchy snack in a box. That's all. Just a popcorny, salty, crunchy, buttery tasting snack in a box. That's all. I swear, that's all.
Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color, this has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.